presentation. Welcome everyone to Mentoring Case Writers from Inspiration to Instruction. My name is Lisa Leander, and I'm the Member Services Officer with GBSN. I am the main contact for business schools and our partners. For those of you joining us for the first time, I would like to give a little background information on GBSN before we start the presentation. The Global Business School Network is a leading network of business schools working to improve management and business education in emerging markets. And we do this both through capacity building programs, networking, and our GBSN Connect web portal. Who are we? We are currently 49 members strong and growing. We represent 24 countries. Each of these schools goes through an application process and must be engaged with our mission of improving business education in emerging markets. If you're interested in joining, please feel free to contact me for membership application materials. Beyond our schools, we also have partner organizations, and these include foundations and corporations who share a vision of management education as an important part of international development. These are also the partners that we draw from for many of our internships, our student projects, and other activities and opportunities. We hold several events and activities focused on improving management education. We are very excited to announce that September is Case Method Month, where we highlighted current best practice, new research, and discussion. I encourage you to check out our blog for our guest writers on case method, as well as highlighted case resources and case competitions all on our site. And I'm very pleased to have our second webinar event on Case Method Month focused on case mentoring. I'm pleased to have with us today our presenter, Leif Sjoblom. He's a professor of financial management at IMD. And also joining us today is Winifred Karigu. Winifred is currently the managing director of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, also known as JKUAT in Kenya. JKUAT engages in direct linkages with industry through training, consultancy, and related activities. And good morning, or I should say good afternoon. Winnie, thank you for joining us today and participating in the webinar.
Thank you, Lisa. It is my great pleasure and privilege today to introduce our main presenter, Professor Leif Sjoblom. Leif teaches at IMD, the prestigious school of IMD in Switzerland, and he basically teaches in various programs there, including the Accelerated Executive Development Program, the Program for Executive Development, Mastering Technology Enterprises, and Orchestrating Winning Performance. His special areas of interest include micro-entrepreneurship in sub-Saharan Africa, performance measurement and shareholder value creation, and restructuring the telecommunication industry. Leif has written numerous business cases, and he has mentored scores of budding case writers, including myself. I would now like to hand over to him to begin his presentation for today. Welcome, Leif.
Thank you. I started doing case mentoring in Africa in 2005, and I just want to put up a couple of things I've done. A number of cases that have been produced, a number of cases ongoing. For the moment, I'm involved in mentoring more than 60 faculty members in East Africa, and also some of the other activities. I'm quite involved in on the editorial boards of some case journals, for those of you who are interested in publishing your cases, and also as a judge in a number of case competitions. What I plan to talk about today is not necessarily what I did a few years ago, but many of the things that I wish I had done if I had known what I know today. I want to start with a question: what does it take to make a good case writer? And really, I think to be an ideal case writer, there are a number of things. The first one, there's no real shortcut. You need the experience and you need to work very hard. It's not something you learn in one day or 1 week or maybe even 1 year. The second thing is I think it's very useful to be a good case teacher. If you write a case without ever having taught a case in class, I think it's very difficult. Most faculty learn how to teach a case and then they learn how to write a case because you need to understand the way you teach a case and the way you use a case as a learning tool. A case is not just a story, it's not just an article, and it's something I will come back to a little bit later. In order to become a good case teacher, I think you need to be a good case student. When you look at many Western or especially North American MBA programs, a student would get exposed to 200, 300, 400 cases during 1 or 2 years. If you have seen a couple of hundred cases, I think it's a lot easier to become a good case teacher, and if you're a good case teacher, it's a lot easier to become a good case writer. And then finally, feedback is also useful. Okay, this is the ideal profile. In emerging markets, you hardly ever find people with this profile. So what I want to concentrate on is that the way to learn cases, it's really to write a lot of cases, hard work. You have to write many cases before you have a really good one. I think for myself, I wrote cases for about 3 years, maybe 10 to 12 cases before I wrote one that I would consider myself to be a good case. So there's no real shortcut. It's all about just doing it. But feedback is also important. So this is about mentoring, and that's what I really plan to talk about. When you write cases, and also when you mentor case writers, there are 3 golden rules in my mind. The first one is that not all the teaching should be done by the teacher, not all the learning should be done by the student. Cases are about participative learning. It's about faculty learning from students, students learning from faculty, and the same thing applies to the mentoring. And I think this is very important. It's very different from lecturing that some of you may be used to. The second one is a case typically has no single correct answer. So you need to deal with ambiguity. The way you learn using the case method is to argue, discuss, and try to convince other people that you have a better solution than the other person. But both solutions may be perfectly viable. The third rule is that there's no single correct way of teaching or writing a case. Everyone has to find their own style and their own approach. What you will get in the next 20 minutes or so is my approach. Don't just assume it's the only way of doing it or the correct way of doing it. You can get some ideas, you can get some inspiration, but at the end of the day, it will be up to you to decide how you want to do it. There is a correct way, in my mind, of developing a case, and there's a typical way of doing it, and they are not the same. So this slide is actually very important. The most typical way cases are developed for first-time case writers is that you start by finding a protagonist. Typically very opportunistic. It may be one of your former students, it may be a friend, it may be a family member. Then you write a story about this protagonist. And once you have the case completed, you try to figure out how to teach it. This is not the best way. It's a very typical way, but I think the correct way is slightly different. The correct way is to start by identifying the learning objectives. What do you want students to learn at the end of the session? That then leads to finding the right protagonist. You want to find a case company that matches your learning objectives. And the writing is about figuring out what is the optimal way of getting these learning objectives across to the students. So there are 3 parts. It's about the learning objectives, it's about dealing with the protagonist and identifying the protagonist, and it's about designing the case optimally. And those are the ones I plan to talk about in a bit more detail. When you mentor a person, a mentee, there are 4 key issues in my mind to think about. The first one, related to my previous point, is to insist on a detailed teaching plan very early. The teaching notes should be written before or at the same time as the case is written. That hardly ever happens in my experience, and it makes everything a lot more difficult. So it may require a bit more work up front. It will pay off handsomely later when you get into the case writing. Second issue, be clear on expectations. Deadlines, what should be delivered at the deadlines. Make sure that you have a contract between yourself and the mentee to make sure that everybody knows what is expected. The third point is, or the third issue is, it's very important to participate in at least one meeting with the case protagonist. The interviewing skills are very important when you interview the case protagonist. And usually a new case writer does not maybe have the required skills. So it's important to be there. It's also important to show the commitment. If you have two people showing up, it sends a signal to the protagonist that we are serious about this business, and you tend to get a better buy-in by doing so. And the fourth point, insist on the case being used at least once in class before it's finalized. The best way to find out if a case works, if it's good, not so good, is to use it. I routinely use my cases 4 or 5 times in class before I make the final version. And every time I teach them, I learn something from the students. Something is not clear, some information is missing, something is redundant. You really learn and get the best feedback by using the case in class. So these 4 issues, I will again come back and talk about them in a bit more detail. But what I want to talk about is the whole process about managing the case mentoring. The first step is about the learning points. You need to understand the context of the case, and you need to be well prepared before you go ahead. So the case writer should be able to answer the following questions. The first one is, who is the target audience? For which course is this case intended? That is usually fairly straightforward. But there's a difference between writing a case for undergraduates, for MBA students, and for an executive audience. You write it differently, both in terms of style and content. The second one is more important, but maybe a bit more difficult. A case or teaching session should typically have between 1 and 3 key learning points. And the learning points should be important and relevant to the course you are teaching. So if your mentee is not able to give 3 learning points, 3 important relevant learning points that should come out of the case, most likely the person is not ready to get started on the writing. The question you should ask yourself is a case really the best way of getting these learning points across? The case is, in my opinion, a good way of teaching. It's not the only way of teaching, and it's not always the best way of teaching. So what I typically find is, in terms of the journals, I get case submissions to journals where a case may not really be the best way of doing it. For example, there are times when a lecture serves its purpose. You don't need a case, you can do it by a lecture, and what you get is a lecture note that is called a case submission. The second one is, does a good case already exist? Don't reinvent the wheel. In my experience, when supervising case writers, in one case we produced about 5 or 6 cases on more or less the same topic and fairly similar cases. And I think that's a waste of time and resources. If someone has written a good case, you don't need to write your own case. You can use other people's cases. The mentee should have a fairly specific teaching plan in mind. I usually ask 2 questions. In the first 15 minutes, how do you plan to run your teaching session? What is the first question you will ask? If they don't have a clear answer, again, they're not ready to get started on the case writing. The same thing about the closing 15 minutes. What are the 1 to 3 learning points they want to reinforce, and how do they plan to do it? And they should have a list of questions that they plan to ask the protagonist during the interview. So always be prepared. Insist on them having made a list of questions in advance. Don't start writing the case until you have done your homework. If you go to the protagonist, you are not very well prepared, you are not very well focused, you lose a lot of goodwill. They usually donate their time, they don't have a lot of time, and they don't have the tolerance to just sit and chat about things. But that said, keep in mind that most cases, the final version is quite different from what you initially planned. That said, you should still always start with a plan. So have a plan, how you plan to teach this case in class, but be flexible to change when the situation requires it. The second step about how to manage the process is to identify and manage the protagonist. So I kind of mentioned that most protagonists are opportunistic. There's nothing wrong with having opportunistic protagonists, but ideally you should start from the learning objectives, what you want to achieve, and then find the ideal protagonist. After you have selected it, you need to manage the protagonist very carefully. It's very important to get the buy-in. What is in it for the protagonists? Some of them will ask you directly, what's in it for me? And it's up to you to decide. The most typical answers is that you have done something very interesting. It would be very good PR for you and your company to get exposed to this and be able to teach students. But keep in mind, there are always some protagonists who have done something interesting, but they don't necessarily want to share it because it gives them an advantage. The second reason for doing it may be that they can get useful feedback. So what I typically do when I write a case, the first time I teach it, I invite the company or the protagonist to come to class, attend the discussion, and listen to the solutions by the students. That may or may not be useful and an interesting experience, but usually they like it. Keep them involved throughout the process. Don't go and meet the protagonist and then 6 months later you send them a final case. They are interested in seeing drafts, they are interested in discussing, they usually want to get some feedback, and a very important part of this is to make sure that all the time you ensure the confidentiality. So you ask them, is there anything here that's sensitive that you would not like to see in the case? They have to sign off on the case before it's finalized. And third important thing, respect deadlines and complete the case before they lose interest. Normally, when you start writing a case, the protagonist may be very excited about this. It's something new, it's something interesting, but you can be pretty sure that in 2-3 months, if they haven't seen any feedback or any result, they may also lose that interest. So don't take too long. Try to complete the case in 3, 4, 5 weeks before they lose that interest, or you may miss the opportunity. Interviewing process. If you don't, as a mentor, actively participate in the interviewing process at least once with the protagonist, you will not be able to give very good feedback. And my experience is that first-time case writers, they don't usually ask the right question, partly because they are not clear about what they want to get out of this. They have not defined the learning objectives, and they ask the wrong questions. But I also seen situations where what was, in my mind, a fantastic, interesting case issue that was mentioned during the interview never showed up in the first draft I received of the case. So this may or may not be a good idea, of course, because the case writer is the person in charge. But it's quite typical in my mind that they miss many interesting case issues, and if you're not there during the interviews, you're not going to be able to guide them in the right direction. So this is about the protagonist and how you manage that relationship. The third part, which is what most people concentrate on, but it's only part of the equation, is to write the case and, even more importantly, the teaching note. A very typical example or something I see all the time is that what you get is a draft which is a very interesting story, but it's not really a good case. A good case is not the same as a good story. A good case is a good story, but a lot more in addition. So again, I'm recapping a few things. The issue should be relevant to the course learning objectives. You start by defining the learning objectives and you pick an issue that is relevant. It should ideally be a bit controversial, because what you want is a good discussion. If you recall that a case does not necessarily have one correct answer, the way students learn from a case discussion is to disagree about the correct solution, arguing about the correct solution, and trying to convince each other that their solution is preferred to the other person's solution. And the very typical outcome is that at the end of the day, there's no clear agreement. Different people prefer different solution, but just by understanding that different people can come to different conclusions based on the same facts is already a very good learning outcome. The case should be presented in a balanced and neutral way, not to bias the students in one direction or the other. So typically, let's say that in a case there are two possible outcomes that the company could do. If you do a vote, the best outcome is split 50-50. Half the class says yes, half the class says no. That's maximum disagreement. That's the maximum opportunity to learn because we have a different opinion. The learning points should be discovered by the students. So if the learning points are too obvious, they are not going to remember them. Some of the best learning points or some of the best cases I've seen were the ones where I figured it out, and it's really learning that sticks to your mind. So what this means is that the solution to a case should not be too obvious. It also should not be impossible. I've seen both. I've seen case writers submitting a teaching note where basically you can read the correct answer straight from the case. It is too obvious. I also seen teaching notes where regardless how many times you read the case, there's no way you could find this solution because it's just not covered. You need to get that balance. And I think that's very important for the mentor to point out and direct people how to do that. One of the reasons we use cases is that we want, based on one case, to generate some learning points that are useful generalizations or currently useful generalizations. So we go from looking at one company to drawing conclusions that we hope will apply to also to other situations. And of course, there's a very big danger here that we are drawing conclusions based on a sample of one, or conclusions that are valid only in a specific setting. For example, something could be valid in a specific time period, but it's not valid no longer today. So I just want to caution about this. You many times find in the teaching notes going from a sample of one to a general conclusion that is not necessarily always going to be valid. And this is also something the students need to be aware of and apply critical thinking. Now, one of the very important things, the case is a case, but you will ultimately be evaluated based on the quality of the teaching note. The teaching note is where you tell other instructors, this is the target audience, these are the learning points, and this is the way I would use the case in the classroom. If you send your case to a case competition, or if you send it to be published in any journal, the teaching note is much more important than the case. A good teaching note means that some other faculty in some other parts of the world can just pick up the teaching note, read through it very quickly, decide whether the case will work for them or not, and basically use that case in class. And my experience is that this is one of the most difficult things to do, especially for new case writers. But it's something that I try to insist on a lot because having a good teaching plan in mind will make the case writing a lot easier. And finally, another very important point, you need to get written sign-off from the protagonist. For legal reasons, obviously to protect yourself, but also to make sure that there's nothing confidential and to make sure that you have respected the relationship, you have received information from the protagonist, they get a chance to review it, correct any mistakes, delete any confidential information, and basically say that we are happy with the case the way it stands. So I want to recap and review the most typical mistakes that are made by first-time case writers or by people mentoring first-time case writers. I think these are the kind of mistakes I wish I had known when I started in 2005. It's a lot easier after the fact. You learn these things. The first one is that you have no real contract. Expectations are not clear. you have your expectations, the case writers have their expectations, but they don't really match. For example, when you receive something from the case writer, it's not what you expected. When they receive feedback from you, it's not what they expected, and it's not really a good relationship. So spend some time up front making sure that expectations are clear on both sides. Mismanagement of the protagonist's expectations. It's extremely important to spend some time explaining to the protagonist what they will get out of it, not to create unrealistic expectations, but especially to ensure that they understand that things will be confidential until the point of sign-off, and they will have a chance to review everything and approve everything before the case is released. The third one, very important again, very typical, the teaching note is an afterthought rather than being an explicit part of the process. Today, when I mentor people in case writing, I really insist on having a good draft teaching plan up front. As I said, it is more painful in the beginning. It will pay off a lot when you get into the case writing. And not writing a case, writing a story. A story that you can read, you can enjoy, but there's no real analysis, there's no real controversy. That is the role of the mentor, I think, very much to make sure that the story that you typically receive in the first draft can be turned into a real case issue. That's something you learn by experience and by writing lots of cases. And the final thing that happens all over the world, it's about poor time management, missing deadlines, and so on and so on. So in summary, this is my experience from mentoring case writers, mainly in Africa for the last 6 years. I think it's my approach to doing it. As I said, you don't necessarily need to do it the same way, but hopefully you get some ideas and some insights from this presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leif. And I also want to let people know that they can go ahead and send in their questions via the chat or also raise their hand. I also wanted to let Winnie maybe make some comments at first on her experience with case mentoring, working with a case mentor, and some of these tips that Leif mentioned. So Winnie, perhaps you can start us off.
Oh, okay. Well, from my experience, being mentored is one of the best. I don't think you can actually teach yourself to write a case or learn it from the normal lecture room mood. So having someone who walks with you through the process, who discusses the issues at hand, who will look to the key learning points and then give you feedback, tell you where you're going wrong or where the case is to the best outcome is too obvious, and so on. I found it great, and I think during the three years that Leif mentored us, I gained a lot. I am still learning, by the way. I don't think I write really good cases, but I hope I'm getting better as time goes on.
Great. Thanks so much, Winnie. So for Leif, question for you. You mentioned during the interview process good questions versus bad questions versus helping the mentee determine what type of questions to ask. Can you give a little bit more insight into the interview process and some best practice related to that?
I think it depends on many things, so it's difficult to say, but first of all, the protagonists are offering their time, and you need to respect that. You need to make sure that you don't waste their time. So what that means is you need to be well prepared. Basic facts about the company that you can find on a website, you should know those facts. You should not ask those things. You should read up and prepare to know something about their industry, maybe something about their competitors, something about, well, you should come across as having done your desktop research and being well prepared. If you know what learning objectives you have in mind, your questions will be very focused. You will ask questions directly related to that, well, I think that's very helpful. And if you come across as being focused, knowing what you're doing, you make a much better impression. But I'm not sure I can give anything much more specific than this.
Another question, what are some key elements to include in a teaching note, and alternatively, what shouldn't be in a teaching note? What are some best practice to think about?
Okay, there is a checklist that I didn't put up, but I can send you a link. I can go through a number of things. The first one is just background information, the target audience. This case is intended for, and for example, if it's intended for undergraduates, cases tend to be longer because you have people with less experience. You need to provide more information. If you're targeting a more sophisticated, let's say, executive audience, cases tend to be shorter because they already know a lot more. It's very difficult to write a case for more than one target audience. It's possible, but I think it's you need to keep that in mind. Examples of courses where you have used the case. Key learning points very early up front. These are the things the students should take away from this. And then there should be a teaching plan. So typically, these are the questions that I would ask. A good teaching note would give two answers. One that would be an excellent answer to the question, and one that would be a kind of C answer, which is minimum acceptable but not really a good answer, to give some range. It should point out what are the controversial issues in the case, possibly what are the things the students disagree about, possibly how can you make them even more controversial, and I think the ultimate proof that you have a good teaching note is that the teaching note is so good and detailed enough that some other faculty member decides to adopt your case. So the kind of reward in this business, if you are writing cases, is when someone else, ideally someone you respect as a colleague, thinks that your case is good enough for them to teach.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. This question comes from Dana Ciccone. Is it possible to write a case with multiple protagonists, or is it best in your experience to center the story around one particular person's decision-making?
It's definitely possible, and even I should really have mentioned this. When I say protagonist, I usually think about a company, not necessarily a person. It depends on the case, but my recommendation is that anytime you write a case, don't just talk to one person inside the company, because you will get a biased view. Try to talk to as many people as possible. 3, 4, 5 people. You most likely start with let's say the entrepreneur, the CEO of the company. Ask to talk to some of their reports. Sometimes you get conflicting or contradicting information, and that makes a case much more interesting. So the CEO may say something, an employee may say something a bit different. You just need to be careful how you manage it. But in general, I would not recommend just talking to one person. As many as possible.
The next question comes from Guillermo Rivero. Hi, Leif. Could you please talk about the anatomy of a case? What are the key elements of a case? I think there are so many different cases that I prefer not to do it. A good case should not be done using a template. You should, if you have seen lots of cases, you can you know what they look like, but I prefer not to give a template because I think then all cases start to look the same. You can use cases for a number of different things. Let me give a couple of examples. A case can be used as an application for some academic framework or theory. So you can, for example, start a session by teaching this is a theory, and then you let the students apply it to the case, and they get experience doing it. It's also a way of creating new theory. So you can, for example,
assign over a number of sessions 2-3 cases to the students, and based on that, they try to create a more general theory. So you go in the other direction. A case can be something where you compare and contrast something. For example, one successful company, one less successful one that you consider to be a good leader, one that is not so good, and again try to draw conclusions based on that. But the most typical case is one where you have to make a decision. So this decision can be enter a new market, enter a new product, expand a company, fire someone. That's the most typical case. And I think a case is flexible. I don't want to give too much details about, or I don't want to be too prescriptive about how to go about writing it.
Great, thanks. I also wanted to open up to Winnie if you had anything that you wanted to add to any of those questions before we go on.
Not at this point.
Okay, great. Then I'll go on to the next question. After identifying the learning objectives, how do you go about identifying a protagonist?
Again, it depends on the learning objectives. So yeah, if someone can give me a specific learning objective, I can try to give an example.
Okay.
But,
well, maybe an example of a specific case that you've worked on recently, if you can give an example of how you identified a protagonist.
Not recently, but actually a long time ago. It was on the telecommunications industry in Europe. When it was an industry that used to be highly technical, dominated by state-owned monopolies, and was being deregulated. And it was also moving from a highly technical industry to being very consumer-driven, where you needed to understand and have consumer insights in order to be successful. So for that case, there's one company that some of you may know called Virgin, Richard Branson's company in the UK, which is well known for extremely good customer service, customer satisfaction, and understanding end user needs. And I looked at this company and said the telecommunications industry would be a natural next step for Virgin to get into this business. They are not yet in that business. Media is being distributed to young people more and more through the handset. So let's just speculate that they may get into this industry. I wrote to Richard Branson and said, I think you should get into the telecommunications industry. I would like to write a case about this. Whether you plan to do it or not, I would be interested in writing a case. He responded, we would be delighted to talk to you. And actually, we plan to get into this industry. So I wrote the case. I could not release it until they had made it official that they plan to go into that industry. But it was an interesting issue. I found the company that would be the ideal example of this, and even more interestingly, they actually did it.
Great. Thanks for that example. The next question is, you mentioned that lectures are at times a better way to teach certain subjects. What learning objectives are not best served by cases, or where have you found an example where it was better to use a lecture versus a case?
I want to give just a couple of examples. If the objective is just to provide specific knowledge or content, you can do a lecture, you can assign a chapter in a book, or you can possibly do it through a case. But case, in this case, is not the only way of doing it. When we're talking about specific techniques, let's say that you need to build a spreadsheet model of a business. That does not really require a case. So you can do exercises. In many quantitative subjects like finance and accounting, it can be done using the case method, but many times having a simple exercise is, I think, a better way of doing it.
Okay, great. Are cases more effective when teaching more experienced participants? This is the undergraduate versus graduate versus executive education. When are cases more effective?
I'm sure people disagree, but first of all, when you teach more experienced people, they have very low tolerance for listening to a lecture. They want to be active, they want to be challenged, and they want to use their personal experience. So I think cases are very good for that. Are cases the best way of doing it? Not necessarily. There's a lot of talk about action learning, which basically takes the involvement one step further. You actually do something. Let me give an example. I take one of my executive programs to Nairobi. One of the things we look at is distribution to low-income people, and it's a case called Kaskasi Networks that is available free of charge on your website. Winifred and I wrote it together. And you can teach them things using that case, but what's even more effective is I actually put my executive group in one of the slums in Nairobi, and they had to visit people and collect consumer insights to understand how much money do people make, how do they spend that money, and what are they willing to buy using that money. So a case, I think, is a better way of doing things than a lecture, but actually real action learning is even better than doing a case.
I want to open those last two questions up to Winnie and also have her comment a little bit on the Kaskasi case. Again, that's our highlighted case for this week on the GBSN case method website. It is available currently free of charge for a limited time. So the two questions, Winnie, I thought that you might want to add to is the question about when are lectures sometimes more effective than using a case. Have you had an example with a specific learning objective taught better by lecture? And then the other question for you is what experience have you had that are cases more effective when teaching more experienced participants? So maybe you can add anything to those two questions as well.
Okay. Well, in my experience, in my setup, we use the lecture method more with undergraduates, but as they move up more, like the final year students, we begin to introduce them to the simpler cases. So we are doing it in the opposite way to Leif, what we said earlier. However, in our MBAs, we do use the case method quite a bit. And when it is executive MBA, we rely on this method a lot more because we find that in the executive MBA program, and ours probably differs a little bit, maybe the meaning for us might be a little bit different. These are usually senior managers from various outfits, maybe government or corporates and so on, who are there to enhance their decision-making skills and learn a few more things. They have less tolerance to lecture methods, and they respond much more. They are much more interested when you use the cases. So I think I have addressed both questions from my perspective.
Great, thanks. And on top of that, I'd like to ask both of you in regards to the more effective with experienced participants. What about the size? Can you use a case in a large class, say 100 students? What have you found to be effective using case method on the size and the ideal class size for using it? And I'll open it up to both of you.
Well, in my personal experience, I think between 30 to 40 works much better for me when I'm using the case method. But I am sure that Leif has a different take on this.
Yeah, there's a practical limit. I used cases myself with up to 90 people, and I think that it's possible, but it's pushing the limit. It depends on, you actually need to change the way you are teaching a little bit. And our full-time MBA program has 90 students. They are actually graded, 50% of their grade is based on class participation. So if you teach a class of 90 people, it is a challenge because you also need to keep track of what they said and give them a grade at the end of each session. If you go a lot higher than 90, I think it becomes difficult. You can use a case. It can still be better than a pure lecture, but there's no way you can assess the performance based on the class discussion, because clearly not everybody will get a chance to participate.
Great, thank you. I just want to let you know we have about 10 minutes left to the presentation. For those still joining us, please feel free to send in your questions via chat. I also wanted to give the opportunity to those who would like to be taken off of mute and ask your question. Go ahead, you can raise your hand now if we have anyone interested in asking Winnie or Leif. You can raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and answer a few more questions while we're waiting on that. This one is in regards to the type of cases. We talked about in the last webinar short cases or mini cases, 2 to 3 pages. We have another question asking about does the case have to be a written document or can you use different media? So maybe you can talk about what a case could or should look like.
Okay, I will give a couple of comments. I mean, you can't give a definite answer to should the case be 3 pages or 15 pages. That depends on how complex a situation is, and it really, you start with your learning objectives. I think there's a good reason to write short cases that focus on only one issue. So if you're teaching marketing, you may want to have one simple short case on segmentation, you may want to have one on distribution, you may want to have one on positioning, maybe one on pricing, but really focused cases. You can have more integrated cases that look at everything at the same time. So a marketing case on pricing, positioning, distribution, segmentation. It's just a different learning objective, and I think a mix. I would. If you teach a longer course, I would personally start with a number of short cases to kind of make a very specific point, and then at the end of the course I would do the integration, because anytime you teach a single issue, you miss something. So you also want to look at the big picture. That's the first question. Related to different media, I've done cases using video. I think it's a lot better than a written case, because you actually get to see the people, you get a feel for it. And the fact is that today's students don't like to read a lot. So the shorter the case, or if you can use some alternative, it's even better. I used cases using PowerPoint, where you present a couple of PowerPoint slides. They don't need to read anything in advance. And depending on the discussion and what questions you get, you may present additional information. So you have a stack of PowerPoints. You don't present everything. You present based on their questions, and the case can go in many different directions. So you can be very creative. There are lots of ways of doing things.
Great, thank you so much. As a reminder, both the recording of the webinar along with this PowerPoint presentation that Leif just presented will be available after the webinar. We'll be sending out a link likely on Monday with where you can access this. It will all be on the GBSN website, on the Case Method website as well. So you will have access to it. We encourage you to send it to other individuals who are interested. On that note, it looks like we've got all the questions answered, and we haven't had any attendees who would like to be taken off of mute. Winnie, perhaps you could help wrap up the session with a brief summary, and then I invite you all, everyone, to join us on November 4th is our next webinar. This will be focused on family business. We'll be having 3 presenters, one from India, Canada, and the U.S., discussing the challenges in family business. So I invite you to join us. Information and registration will be going out next week. And today is officially our last day of Case Method Month of September, but all of our materials and resources, including the Kaskasi case that we just launched this week, as well as other cases that we've highlighted, case competitions, our weekly blog, all has been focused on case methods. So I encourage you to check that out as well. So Winnie, perhaps you could close us up and we'll wrap up the webinar.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So just to recap what Leif has said, the point about becoming a good case writer is experience and hard work, and that you may have to write many cases before you write a good one. In good cases, both learning and teaching should be done by both the teacher and the student. And when you have a good case, the more you teach it, the more you find new things, or you learn new things out of it. A good case should have no single correct answer, but perhaps many viable alternatives. When it comes to mentoring, the teaching plan should be a good mentor encourages the teaching plan to be done up front. The mentor should have clear expectations and should also participate in meetings with the protagonist. He or she should insist on the case being tested in class before it is finalized. There should be one to three good key learning points in a good case, and the case should be more than just a good story. So to add to that, I would like to reiterate that Leif mentored about 22 of us at JKUAT for 3 years between 2005 and 2008 in case writing. And myself in particular, he mentored me in writing about 4 cases, and we ended up writing the Kaskazi case together. I think I'll end there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Again, the materials, and if you have any questions specifically for Winnie or Leif, they will also can respond to you by email as well. Again, we look forward to hopefully to see that you'll join us on November 4th. I do have someone raising their hand, and since we do have about 5 minutes left, if we have some time, I will go ahead. They put their hand down. Maybe so if they're interested. Looks like maybe they don't have access to a microphone. Let me just try. Hold on just one moment. Guillermo Rivero, can you hear me? Oh, unfortunately, it doesn't sound like his microphone is working. So again, I think we'll go ahead and officially close the webinar at this time. I look forward to everyone joining us. Again, thank you so much for your time, Leif and Winnie, and really bringing some best practice and some good pointers as we think about writing case and case mentors. So the webinar now is officially ended. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.